Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another edition of our webinar series, Inside Immigration. Today, we're joined by panelists and associates at Green & Spiegel, Valerie Kleinman and Claire MacLean. Please feel free to ask any questions via the pop-up text bar on the right side of your screen, and we'll do our best to address your questions at the end of the webinar. If the panelists do not get to your question, you can contact them through the information provided on screen now. And with that being said, I'm going to hand things over to the panelists.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. So as Stephen mentioned, we're going to go through some of the topics that you can see on the screen in the agenda, and then we'll have an opportunity to go through some questions that you might have. So I'm going to start off by talking about some of the updates on the temporary immigration side, and then Claire will jump into the permanent immigration side. So the first big one is always the COVID travel restrictions, which for some of you who join us regularly know are always changing, and this week is no exception. So we have a very big change coming on Friday. So effective Friday, fully vaccinated travelers will no longer need to provide a negative COVID pre-arrival test. So for those of you who've traveled recently, you've had to provide a negative PCR test or antigen test conducted within a certain time period before your arrival in Canada. And we are about to see that requirement be eliminated. So that's a huge step in terms of travel to Canada, and that's effective Friday. So if you're traveling tomorrow, you still need to follow the current rules, and effective Friday, you will not need to do the pre-arrival tests. In addition to that, just know that we still need to use the ArriveCan app, and they still will be conducting random COVID tests at the arrival. So at the airport, when you arrive, you could be selected for a random test, but you do not need to quarantine while you're awaiting results for those tests. So that's a big change this week. Also wanted to provide you with a bit of an update on the processing of temporary residence applications. So we still have a measure that was put in place due to COVID available to us. So there's currently a public policy that allows visitors to apply for a work permit in Canada. So normally somebody here as a visitor in the vast majority of circumstances is not permitted to submit a work permit application in Canada. And there was this interim measure put in for public policy reasons due to COVID, and it has been announced that this is going to be extended to February 2023. So individuals in Canada who are eligible to apply for a work permit may continue to do that until February 2023, unless of course it's extended again. In terms of processing times for people who are applying for work permits in Canada or work permit extensions in Canada, unfortunately, the processing times have just been consistently increasing. So as of today, the processing time for an in Canada work permit application or work permit extension is 135 days. So we're looking at about 4.5 months, which is a significant period of time. So we ask everybody to really plan ahead. If you have an upcoming work permit expiry, even, when I say upcoming, I mean within, 6 months or even earlier, reach out to us early on so we can plan for this long processing time, because we don't know, it could, hopefully it goes down, it could continue to go up. So just always important to plan ahead to ensure that we're applying well in advance. And just a comment that with overseas work permit applications, we're still seeing delays due to COVID. So again, to really plan ahead in that respect. I'm going to move on to some of the recent measures that were put into place to assist people in the Ukraine and family members in the Ukraine. So a little less than 2 weeks ago, the government of Canada announced a new program, the Canada-Ukraine Authorization for Emergency Travelers, as an accelerated temporary way for people in the Ukraine, Ukrainian citizens, and their family members to seek temporary entry to Canada. So this applies to both Ukrainian citizens and their immediate family members. So, and it's a way for people to come here much faster than usual. So there's an expedited processing of visitor visa applications. So now that processing time is 14 days, which is excellent. And there's also the option for these individuals to request a work permit as part of that process. And the work permit is, you know, it's a great thing because there's the option of getting a 3-year work permit, which would be open, meaning that the person, once they arrive in Canada, would be able to get their work permit. They'd be able to work for any employer in Canada, in, you know, any occupation in any location in Canada. So it gives people a lot of flexibility. There's also options through this process for children to obtain study permits as well, so they can study in Canada during this time where they're here. There are some exceptional measures to allow officers to waive normal requirements to have a valid passport, and these requirements are reviewed on a case-by-case basis. And in that case, they would issue a single journey travel document to allow the person to come to Canada. There's also some other special measures that were included as part of this package, including waiving application fees. So normally there are processing fees for visitors and workers and students, and also to submit biometrics, and they've been waived in the case of Ukrainians, and also waiving the regular vaccination requirements as well. And these measures are available to people who are both outside of Canada and people who are in Canada. So individuals who may be here who are Ukrainian citizens as visitors may benefit from these measures in that they may be able to apply for a work permit under this special category, the special open work permit category. Of course, there are increased volumes of applicants due to the situation. And so IRCC has made some logistical changes, relocating staff, and the big one is establishing additional biometric collection centers, because Ukrainian citizens do have to provide biometric information. They have added some locations to provide biometric data outside of the Ukraine, because all the visa application centers in the Ukraine where normally you would do that are closed. So they've added locations in Moldova and Hungary. And also they've expanded in some other countries where normally you would just be able to provide biometrics at the visa application center. Some of the embassies have added biometric collection centers, all of which is only accessible by appointment. But for example, in Poland and Germany and Austria and Romania, unfortunately though, because of the demand, there can be significant waits to get an appointment to provide your biometrics, because an appointment is required, particularly in Poland. And unfortunately, as of yet, there have not been any announcements about waiving this biometric requirement. So individuals do still need to have the biometrics completed as part of the process. And unfortunately, given the volume, there are going to be some waits there. And with that, I'm going to pass things over to Claire, who is going to provide a number of updates on permanent residence, but can continue in this conversation on measures for Ukrainians on the permanent resident side.
Thanks, Valerie. So yeah, kind of as an extension to these emergency travel options, Immigration has also announced that they are working on developing a special family reunification stream for Ukrainian family members of Canadian citizens and permanent residents. We don't know precisely what that's going to look like yet, but what we're hoping for is some level of broadening the eligibility criteria of the regular family sponsorship, as well as some degree of expedited processing. And that's something that Immigration has already been doing. So they've announced it since January of this year. They have been focusing on expediting processing of permanent residency applications for Ukrainian nationals, both outside and inside of Canada. So that includes sponsorship applications, proof of citizenship, basically anything not temporary that is already in process on the permanent residency or the citizenship side. Immigration is looking to expedite in order to facilitate getting those individuals into Canada and safe as soon as possible. So there's no, targeted processing on the expedite stream. but what we've been seeing is that these files are moving forward more quickly. So if you do have an application in process and you are a Ukrainian national, you may wish to flag your application to immigration in order to expedite, benefit from these expedited processing channels. So that's all on the Ukraine measures for now. We are hoping for news of that family reunification stream within the next few weeks. The other big update that we saw in March that was, less of a surprise was the Atlantic Immigration Program's official launch. So this Atlantic Immigration Program has been around for a while. It was initially launched in 2017 as a 5-year pilot, and kind of following the success and the learnings of that pilot, on March 6th of this year, the new Atlantic Immigration Program was released. So this is a permanent immigration program now, and it has a quota of about 6,000 for the 2022 calendar year, allocated amongst the 4 maritime provinces, so Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland. We don't know how those spots are allocated amongst the provinces, but we know in total there's about 6,000. So just as a reminder, the Atlantic Immigration Pilot is basically the Atlantic Immigration Program now is basically a 3-step program. So an employee finds a designated employer, gets an eligible job offer, and applies for an endorsement application, which they can then use to apply for permanent residency, either from within Canada or outside of the country. And with the launch of this permanent program, we've seen, a lot of the successful measures from the pilot brought back in, and then some changes to make the program a little bit more useful for both the provinces and for the applicants who are looking to leverage the benefits of the program. So a few changes for employers to be aware of under the new program is that designations are now permanent. So because the program is permanent, they'll no longer expire with the expiry of the program. But those employers who were designated under the pilot program need to be redesignated. So something to look into now if you are looking to benefit from the program, get designated. That designation will last, permanently unless it's revoked by the province. Each province has now, as of March 6th, also released their new designation process. So all those processes have moved online, makes it a lot quicker and more efficient to get that designation from the employer perspective. Once the employer is designated, there's also a new requirement that they complete both an onboarding and an intercultural competency training. This needs to be done before that employer submits their first endorsement application. After the endorsement application is submitted, the employer also receives a referral to a designated service channel. This is a type of kind of personalized service that we've seen used throughout a few different immigration programs that are designed to be fast and efficient in order to meet the needs of employers. So we see it in the global talent stream. We're now seeing it in the Atlantic Immigration Program, and it's basically a personalized connection with a representative from the program who's available to provide guidance and answer questions to the employer. That referral is valid for at least a year after the first designation, or excuse me, the first endorsement application is submitted. So on the applicant side, a few changes to the eligibility, nothing too onerous. First is a change to the language requirement. So previously CLB4 in any occupation was fine. Now immigration wants to see CLB5 in each language category for those who have job offers in the NOC O, A, or B occupation. Those with a NOC C job offer are still fine at CLB4. Similarly, those with a job offer in a NOC O or A occupation need to show a 1-year post-secondary credential, as opposed to previously where any individual was just required to show a high school equivalent. So some different language and some education requirements under the program. The other big change that we saw in this program was an amendment to the related work experience requirement, which is required for any applicant who is not applying under the international student stream. So students are exempt from this. Everyone else needs to show they have at least 1 year of work experience. Previously, it was 1 year of work experience at or below the skill level of the role they'd been offered within the past 3 years. This year, or this new pilot, I should say, is showing some leniency. So they're increasing the eligibility period from 3 years to 5 years. So you still need to show 1 year at or above, at or below the skill level of the role they've been offered, but we have 5 years to show that now. And there's an exemption to the skill level requirement for individuals working in certain NOC C occupations. So home support workers and personal support workers, kind of in a recognition that the provinces need these workers and they need them quickly. They're eligible to use work experience obtained in a lower skill level. So the same restriction doesn't exist for those two occupations, making it a little bit easier for candidates who've been offered roles in these positions to qualify under the Atlantic Immigration Program. So it's been recently launched. You know, it's a great program. We know it's a great program because it's come back in a permanent way. We're hoping, you know, that applications that are in process will get back down to that 6-month processing standard that the Atlantic Immigration Program has. You know, it's a great program for those who have job offers in the Maritimes, very lenient. So if this is something that could apply to you, kind of based on what I'll speak about next, it would certainly encourage you to explore this option. And that kind of leads me into the final topic, which is permanent residence processing. For a lot of candidates with permanent residence applications in process, it's been kind of a frustrating year. Because of COVID, there have been delays. There have been a lot of unanticipated announcements from immigration throughout the past 18 months about permanent residency, some great new programs, some less great delays. So what we're seeing in terms of processing these days is that there are ongoing delays, especially for candidates outside of Canada. So under the Canadian experience class, we're seeing processing times of approximately 7 months. Under the federal skilled worker program, we're seeing processing times of approximately up to 24 months. Immigration has indicated that because their inventory of high skilled applications is so very high, the federal skilled worker processing times may continue to climb as high as 36 months. So they are allocating more resources to processing these permanent residence applications. They understand that this is an issue. They're making efforts to even modernize future immigration programs by moving applications online, things of that nature to make sure processing, you know, in the future is back down. And they're really working to catch up and get back to the normal processing time for these two programs specifically, which is generally 6 months for 80% of applications. So that kind of leads us to what does the landscape look like for individuals who haven't yet been invited to apply under one of these programs, both of which are administered through the Express Entry system. So combined with these, you know, high processing times, along with the reduction in immigration numbers, which we spoke about during our last seminar, immigration has basically halved their targets through these high skilled express entry programs for 2022. The pause on invitations under the express entry system has been confirmed to continue until at least tomorrow, which, you know, we will all have known as of tomorrow. Immigration has indicated that a small number of invitations in late 2022 will be required to meet the 2023 immigration targets. So what does this mean? Is that basically we don't know precisely when the rounds of invitations will resume. Because of the uncertainty, you know, if you are eligible, you may just wish to consider putting a profile into the system. We never know precisely what's going to happen with express entry. As we saw last year with a draw at 75 points, it's kind of an unpredictable system. So whenever we can get a profile in the pool, that's always a great way to go. It is valid for 12 months. What does it mean other than that is that we are now looking at other immigration programs in order to obtain permanent residency for eligible candidates. So it's been a really great year so far for the provincial nominee programs. We're through the first quarter of 2022 as of tomorrow. The month of March has seen, a lot of activity on the provincial nominee programs. Manitoba, Ontario, Saskatchewan, BC, and PEI have all issued invitations to apply through their express entry linked programs. Notably, through the OINP, we're seeing invitations going out, on a monthly basis for most, if not all, the immigration programs. Includes the master's, the PhD graduate, the job offers, international workers. All of those programs are very active. Under the other immigration categories, the family class, we are seeing spousal sponsorship processing times coming back down. So previously they were exceeding 12 months, which is the normal benchmark for regular average cases. Especially for inland applications, we're seeing those come back down to around the 12-month benchmark. We're seeing open work permits again being kind of resuming issuance. Before those were taking a significant amount of time. Now we're seeing them being issued at around the 8 to 12-month mark, which is great. You can get that open work authorization a little bit sooner than you otherwise would be eligible for. And overall, immigration has they've recently acknowledged there are delays, obviously things kind of beyond anyone's control that are happening and causing these delays, but they are really committed in the 2022 year to getting processing back down. We're expecting the announcement of the budget next week on April 7th. And we're hoping that, funds and resources will be allocated towards processing. And, just adding that extra layer of predictability onto the permanent residency process. So that's kind of all the updates on processing for this month. Kind of as an aside, the H-1B lottery is rolling out in the United States. If you were not selected in that lottery, maybe a good time to start considering your other options. Because permanent residency in Canada is not as predictable as it once was, we do encourage you to start the conversation early, reach out early, explore your options, and hopefully we can leverage some of these unpredictabilities in order to transition or target new permanent residence applicants in the future. So I see we have a few questions. The first one is whether all categories for residency will resume in the summer. Hopefully I touched on that pretty clearly in the express entry section at the beginning. So we are anticipating that draws will resume through the express entry system. We're not precisely sure when. But we do know that the system is still being utilized as a really beneficial tool to target certain applicants. We think that those targets are going to get more specific in the coming years. So yes, permanent residency is still ongoing. Programs are opening and closing. And if you're eligible, get your name in there so that when it does open, you have a chance of being selected. And I believe that's all the questions we have for today. So thanks very much for joining, Steve, and I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, thanks, Claire. I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's webinar, and then special thanks to you, Claire, and to Valerie for sharing your expert knowledge today. If anyone would like to discuss today's topics in more detail, please reach out and book a consultation. The details can be found on screen now. I'd encourage everyone to sign up to our alerts and also follow us on social media to keep up to date with the latest developments inside Canadian immigration. Until next time, everybody, stay safe.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.